Jake Porter pressed his face against the window of the landing shuttle and watched the orange planet grow larger below. Kalara 7 looked beautiful from space, with swirling clouds and 3 small moons. After 6 months of travel from Earth, he was finally here. The shuttle bumped and shook as it entered the atmosphere. Jake grabbed his seat and grinned. He loved this part. Next to him, his best friend Ben Curtis looked a little green in the face. "You okay there, buddy?" Jake asked. "I hate flying," Ben muttered. "Why did I agree to come to another planet again?" "Because you love adventure. And because I needed someone to carry my equipment," Jake said with a laugh. The shuttle landed with a soft thud at the research station. Jake was 34 years old and had spent his whole career studying alien life forms. But this was his first time on an alien planet as part of a real expedition. His specialty was xenobiology, which meant he studied how alien creatures lived and what they ate. He also loved cooking, which made him a bit unusual among scientists. Lisa Grant, the expedition leader, met them at the landing pad. She was a tall woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had been doing this work for 20 years. "Welcome to Kalara 7, she said, shaking their hands. "The Kellerans are waiting to meet you. Remember to be respectful. They have been very generous in letting us study their planet." The Kellerans were the aliens who lived on this planet. They looked like tall, thin creatures with 4 arms and smooth blue skin. Their eyes were large and black, and they moved in a flowing way that reminded Jake of dancers. Velcron was their science liaison. He greeted the human team with a slight bow. When he spoke, his voice came through a translator device that turned his language into English. "We welcome you to our world," Velcron said. "We hope your studies will be productive. However, we must warn you about the Northern Territories. Those lands are what we call Vekmora Tanshela. In your language, it means nothing eats here. They are dead zones, barren. You will find nothing of value there." Jake found that strange. He had read all the reports about Kalara 7 before coming. The Northern Territories covered almost 40% of the planet. How could such a huge area have nothing living in it? "Nothing at all?" he asked. "No plants? No animals?" Velcron made a gesture that the translator said meant certainty. "We have studied these lands for centuries. There are some simple organisms, yes, fungi, lichens, small creatures, but nothing that can sustain life. Nothing edible. Nothing useful. The soil is acidic. The water is wrong. It is a wasteland." Lisa nodded seriously. "We will focus our research on the southern regions then, as planned." But Jake felt curious. A wasteland that covered 40% of a planet? That seemed odd. In his experience, life found a way to exist almost everywhere. The first 2 weeks were busy. The team set up their laboratory and started collecting samples from the areas the Kellerans approved. Jake studied the local food sources that the Kellerans ate. They were interesting, but not very exciting. Most of their food came from large alkaline plants that grew in carefully tended fields. Everything was very organized and controlled. One morning, Jake asked Lisa if he could take a short trip to the edge of the Northern Territories. "Just to look around, why?" Lisa asked, frowning. "The Kellerans have told us there is nothing there." "I know," Jake said, "but I am curious. What if they missed something? What if their biology is different from ours and they cannot see what we might see?" Lisa sighed. "Fine, take Ben with you. Stay close to the border, do not go far, and do not upset the Kellerans." The next day, Jake and Ben loaded a small vehicle with equipment and drove north. The landscape changed as they traveled. The neat, organized farms gave way to rough, rocky ground. The soil turned reddish-orange. Strange rock formations jutted up from the earth like broken teeth. "This place does look pretty dead," Ben said, looking around. "Look closer," Jake said. He stopped the vehicle and got out. The air smelled different here, sharp, acidic. He walked to a cluster of volcanic rocks near a small stream. The water was clear but had a yellowish tint. That was when Jake saw it. Growing on the side of a rock, partially hidden in shadow, was a patch of fungus. It was dark purple with bright red spots. "Beautiful, really. What is that?" Ben asked, coming over to look. "I do not know," Jake said, "but I am going to find out." He carefully collected a sample, wearing gloves and using sterile tools. He placed it in a sealed container. Then he took photos and recorded the location. Back at the research station, Jake ran the fungus through his portable analysis kit. This was a small but powerful device that could break down organic material and tell him what chemicals it contained. He had used it hundreds of times on Earth. The results made him sit up straight in his chair. The fungus was not toxic. Not to humans, anyway. It contained complete proteins, complex carbohydrates, and several compounds that his database said would taste savory and rich. It was edible. More than edible. It looked delicious. "Ben," Jake called out. "Come look at this." Ben hurried over and looked at the screen. "Is this right? This thing is actually food? According to every test I just ran, yes, it should be perfectly safe for humans to eat. Maybe other species too. But the Kellerans said nothing edible grows there." Jake leaned back in his chair and thought, maybe nothing edible for them. What if their digestive system works differently? What if they cannot process acidic foods? He pulled up his files on Kelleran biology. He had studied them during the trip here. Kellerans had evolved in the southern regions of their planet, where the soil was alkaline and the water had high mineral content. Their entire biology was built around processing those kinds of foods. "Look at this," Jake said, pointing at his screen. "Kelleran stomach acid is actually alkaline, not acidic like ours. Their digestive system breaks down alkaline compounds, but acidic foods would be toxic to them. They would get sick." "So the northern territories are full of acidic life forms," Ben said slowly, "which the Kellerans cannot eat. So they assume nothing can eat them." "Exactly," Jake said, feeling excited. "But humans can handle acidic foods just fine. So can lots of other species. This is not a dead zone at all. It is just invisible to the Kellerans." Ben grinned. "You are going to want to go back there, are you not?" "Oh yes," Jake said. "First thing tomorrow." That night, Jake could not sleep. He lay in his bunk thinking about the northern territories. If there was one edible species, there might be more, many more. An entire ecosystem that the Kellerans had never understood. He thought about his grandmother, who had taught him to cook when he was young. She always said that food was everywhere if you knew how to look. She made meals from plants that other people thought were weeds. She found mushrooms in the forest that others walked right past. "Nothing eats here," Jake whispered to himself in the dark. "We will see about that." The next morning, Jake asked Lisa for permission to do a full survey of the northern territories. Lisa looked at his data on the fungus. Then she looked at him. This could upset the Kellerans. They have centuries of research saying those lands are barren. "I know," Jake said, "but what if I am right? What if there is an entire world of food there that could help feed people, humans and maybe other species too? We have to look." Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but be careful. And be respectful. If the Kellerans ask you to stop, you stop." "Understood?" "Understood," Jake said. When Velcran heard about Jake's plan, he was not happy. He came to the research station looking upset. "This is foolish," Velcran said. "We have told you. There is nothing there. You waste your time." Jake showed him the data from the fungus. "This says it is edible, for humans at least, maybe for other species too." Velcran looked at the screen. His large black eyes blinked slowly. "This cannot be correct. Our scientists have studied those organisms. They are toxic to Kellerans, yes," Jake said gently. "But human biology is different. We can eat acidic foods. In fact, we need them. Lemons, tomatoes, vinegar, all acidic, all delicious." Velcran was silent. Jake could see him thinking. "I would like to study this more," Jake said. "With your permission. I promise to share all my findings with you." Finally, Velcran made the gesture that meant uncertain agreement. "Very well, but be careful. If you become ill from eating these things, do not blame us." Jake smiled. "I will be very careful. I promise." That afternoon, Jake and Ben packed their vehicle with equipment for a longer expedition. They filled it with collection containers, analysis tools, camping gear, and safety supplies. Jake also brought his portable cooking equipment. If he found edible species, he wanted to learn how to prepare them properly. As they drove north again, Jake felt like he was heading toward something important. The Kellerans had dismissed these lands as worthless, but Jake suspected they were wrong. He suspected that the northern territories were full of life and food and possibilities. He just had to find it. The northern territories stretched out before Jake and Ben like an alien ocean. Rocks of every color rose and fell in waves across the landscape. Some were smooth and rounded by wind. Others were sharp and jagged, fresh from volcanic activity. The sky above was a pale orange that made everything look like it was glowing. Jake set up their first camp near a cluster of thermal vents. Steam rose from cracks in the ground carrying strange smells. Some were sulfurous. Others were sweet. All of them made Jake curious. We will work in a pattern, Jake explained to Ben. We map the area. We collect samples of everything that looks organic. We test everything for toxicity before we even think about tasting it. Safety first, always, and if something tries to eat us, Ben asked. Jake laughed. Then we run very fast. The first day was amazing. Within hours, Jake found 3 more species of fungi growing in different environments. One grew on the underside of rocks, white and delicate like lace. Another formed thick mats near the thermal vents, bright orange and rubbery. The third grew in the acidic soil itself, looking like tiny umbrellas made of crystal. Each one tested positive for nutrition. Each one was safe for human consumption. Jake could hardly believe his luck. The Kellerans really cannot eat any of this, Ben said, watching Jake work. It is alicitic, most of it, Jake said. Their evolution locked them into one biochemical path, but that opened up a completely different path for other forms of life. Life that they never learned to recognize as valuable. On the second day, Jake found something moving. It looked like a worm, but it was made of what seemed like living glass. It was about as long as his hand and as thick as his thumb. Dozens of them lived in tubes they built from minerals in the ground. When Jake gently pulled one out, it wriggled and reflected the orange sunlight in rainbow colors. That is beautiful, Ben said, and probably edible, Jake added. He ran his tests. The creature was indeed edible. Its flesh was high in protein and minerals. The texture reminded him of squid or octopus. Jake made careful notes about how to harvest them without damaging the population. That evening, Jake decided to cook his first meal from the Northern Territories. He had tested everything thoroughly. The time had come to actually taste what he had found. He started with the purple fungus he had found on his first trip. He cleaned it carefully and sliced it thin. Then he heated a pan over a small portable stove and added a bit of oil he had brought from the research station. When the oil was hot, he laid the fungus slices in the pan. The smell that rose up made both men stop and stare. That smells like mushrooms, Ben said. Really good mushrooms. With something else, Jake said, leaning closer. Something savory. Almost like meat. He let the slices cook until they were golden brown. Then he put one on a plate and let it cool. Both men looked at it for a moment. You first, Ben said. You are the scientist. Jake picked up a piece and took a small bite. He chewed slowly. His eyes went wide. Well? Ben asked nervously. This is incredible, Jake said. It tastes like mushrooms and steak had a baby. It is rich and savory and has this amazing texture. Here, try some. Ben took a bite. His face lit up. This is really good. The Kellerans have been walking past this for centuries. They cannot eat it, Jake reminded him. To them it is poison, but to us it is food. Really good food. Over the next week, Jake found more and more species. He discovered floating creatures that drifted on the wind like jellyfish but smaller. They gathered in clouds at dawn, feeding on aerial plankton that Jake could barely see. When dried, they made crispy chips that tasted salty and complex. He found lichen growing on rocks that, when roasted, developed a nutty flavor. He found mollusks living near the thermal vents that required very careful preparation, but were incredibly nutritious. He found moss in caves that glowed with its own light and tasted slightly sweet. Each discovery was documented carefully. Jake took photos, recorded locations, noted the environment, measured nutrients, and tested cooking methods. His field journal grew thick with notes and sketches. Ben helped with everything. He was not a scientist, but he had good instincts. He spotted things Jake missed. He suggested better ways to collect samples. He became very good at identifying which organisms looked promising. You know what this means, right? Ben said one evening as they sat by their camp stove. If there is this much food here, the Northern Territories could feed millions of people, not Kellerans, but other species, humans, probably lots of other aliens too. Jake nodded slowly. I know. This changes everything about how we understand this planet. Back at the research station, their reports were causing a stir. Lisa Grant read every update Jake sent and kept shaking her head in amazement. Belkran and the other Kellerans were less enthusiastic. They seemed confused and slightly offended that their dead zones were turning out to be anything but dead. After 2 weeks in the field, Jake and Ben returned to the station for supplies. Lisa met them at the door. The Kelleran Scientific Council wants to meet with you, she said. They want to see your evidence. Are they angry? Jake asked. I think they are confused, Lisa said. Centuries of research says those lands are barren. You are saying they missed something huge. That is hard for any scientist to accept. The meeting was held in a large dome made of the same blue material as Kelleran buildings. Jake brought his samples, his data, and his documentation. He also brought some of the food he had prepared. Velcron was there, along with 5 other Kelleran scientists. They looked at Jake with their large black eyes. Their expressions were hard to read, but their body language suggested skepticism. Jake presented his findings. He showed them each species he had found. He explained the biochemical reasons why Kellerans could not eat these organisms, but humans could. He showed nutritional analyses, safety tests, and preparation methods. The Kellerans listened in silence. When Jake finished, one of them spoke. The translator turned her words into English. "This is difficult to accept," she said. "We have studied our planet for thousands of years. How could we miss an entire ecosystem?" "You did not miss it," Jake said gently. "You saw it. You documented it. But you saw it through Kelleran eyes. Your biology told you it was worthless. My biology tells me it is food. Neither of us is wrong. We are just different." Another Kelleran spoke. "You have tasted these organisms? You are certain they are safe?" "I have eaten them myself," Jake said. "So has Ben. No ill effects. In fact, they are delicious." Velcron made a gesture Jake had learned meant consideration. "Show us," he said. Jake had prepared for this. He set up his portable stove right there in the meeting hall. He cooked samples of several species he had found. The purple fungus, the crystal worms, the roasted lichen. He prepared each one the way he had learned was best. The smells filled the dome. The Kellerans reacted with visible surprise. Their translator could not quite capture their comments, but Jake got the impression they found the smells strange but interesting. Of course, the Kellerans could not eat any of it. But Jake and Ben ate in front of them, showing that the food was safe and enjoyable. Lisa even tried some, making appreciative noises. The meeting ended with no firm conclusions. The Kellerans needed time to think. They needed to discuss this among themselves. Jake understood. He was asking them to rethink centuries of knowledge. But something had changed in Velcron. Jake noticed it in the way the liaison looked at the food. There was curiosity now instead of dismissal. "You will continue your research?" Velcron asked as Jake packed up. "If you allow it, yes," Jake said. Velcron was quiet for a moment. Then he made the gesture for agreement. "Yes. Continue. Perhaps we have been blind. Perhaps it is time to see our world through different eyes." Jake smiled. That was progress. He and Ben returned to the Northern Territories with renewed energy. They had support now, or at least tolerance. That was enough. Jake started thinking bigger. If the Northern Territories had this much food, what else did they have? What other resources had been overlooked? What other secrets were waiting to be discovered? He also started thinking about the future. These discoveries needed to be shared, not just with scientists, but with everyone. People needed to know that food could exist in places they thought were empty. More than that, people needed to understand that different species saw the universe differently. What was useless to one species might be precious to another. The key was cooperation and open minds. As Jake fell asleep that night in his tent, listening to the wind whistle through Therox, he thought about everything he had learned. He had come to Kalara 7 expecting to study alien food sources. Instead, he had discovered something much bigger. He had discovered that the universe was more full of possibility than anyone realized. You just had to know how to look. Word spread quickly through the research station. The human scientist had eaten the toxic organisms from the dead zones and survived. More than survived. He claimed they tasted good. Over the next month, Jake tested more species carefully. Each time he prepared something new, Kate monitored his vital signs. Each time, the results were the same. No adverse reactions, no toxicity, just good, nutritious food. The fungus became one of his favorites. When roasted, it developed a deep umami flavor. The tube creatures really did taste like lobster when steamed. The tubers could be prepared like potatoes. The floating jellyfish made excellent crispy snacks when dried. Jake's catalog continued to grow. He found beetles in the acidic soil that, when roasted, had a nutty crunch. There were filter feeders in the acidic lakes that formed large schools. They looked like earth sardines and had a similar taste. Underground, there were fungi that grew in massive networks, producing organs similar to truffles. At dawn, clouds of aerial plankton would drift through the Northern Territories. They were too small to see individually, but in masses they looked like golden mist. Jake discovered they could be collected with fine nets and pressed into nutritious cakes. Near the hottest thermal vents, there was algae that could survive temperatures that would kill most earth plants. It grew in thick mats and had extraordinary nutritional density. One small portion could provide a day's worth of vitamins. Every week brought new discoveries. Jake found scavenger organisms that cleaned up dead matter in the ecosystem. He found predators that hunted other acid-based creatures. He found parasites and symbionts. A complete functioning ecosystem that had existed in plain sight for millions of years. The Kelleran scientific community remained divided. Some scientists accepted the evidence. Others insisted there must be some mistake, some contamination in the data. The debate became heated. Velcron visited Jake's camp regularly now. He had become genuinely interested in the discoveries. One afternoon he arrived with unexpected news. "The Galactic Council has learned of your work," Velcron said. "Several species have expressed interest in sending representatives to Kalara 7. They want to see these organisms for themselves." Jake looked up from his notes. "Really? Which species?" "5 so far. The Taurans, the Mexari, the Holvans, the Centauri, and the Vrin all have acid-tolerant biochemistries. They want to verify that these organisms are truly edible for them." Ben whistled. "That is half the major species in this sector." Velcron nodded. "The Kelleran government is preparing to host them. But there is a problem. They want a demonstration. They want to taste these organisms themselves." Jake felt excitement building in his chest. "A demonstration? You mean like a meal?" "Exactly like a meal. The government has asked if you would be willing to prepare it." This was what Jake had been hoping for, a chance to show the galaxy what he had discovered, a chance to prove that the dead zones were anything but dead. "I will do it," he said. "When? 3 weeks from now. The representatives are traveling from their home worlds. Jake, this will be watched by many people. If something goes wrong, if anyone gets sick, it will damage both human and Kelleran reputations." "I understand the stakes," Jake said, "but I also understand my research. These organisms are safe. I will prove it." The next 3 weeks were intense. Jake worked with Kate to verify the safety of every organism he planned to use. He worked with local Kelleran chefs to learn their presentation styles. He experimented with different preparation methods. He planned a 7-course meal. It would showcase the diversity of life in the Northern Territories. Each course would highlight different organisms and different preparation techniques. For the first course, he would serve the aerial plankton cakes with the phosphorescent moss as a sweet garnish. For the second, thin slices of the crystalline tube creatures steamed and served cold. The third would be a soup made from the filter feeders. The fourth, roasted tubers with the truffle-like fungi. The fifth, the red fungus prepared 3 different ways. The sixth, the crispy beetles on a bed of thermal algae. And for dessert, a dish made from the sweet cave moss. Ben helped him collect specimens. Kate verified each one. Lisa managed the diplomatic aspects, coordinating with the Kelleran government and the visiting species. The night before the demonstration, Jake could not sleep again. He reviewed his plans obsessively. He checked his ingredients. He prepared his kitchen space. Ben found him at 3 a.m, sitting in the kitchen surrounded by notes. "You need to rest," Ben said. "I am too nervous," Jake admitted. "What if they do not like it? What if I cooked something incorrectly? Jake, you have tested everything a dozen times. You know this food is safe and delicious. Trust yourself." Jake nodded, but his hands were still shaking slightly. The demonstration was held in a large hall in the Kelleran capital. Representatives from 5 species sat at a long table. There were also Kelleran officials, human diplomats, and several scientists. Cameras recorded everything. Jake wore his cleanest expedition uniform. His hands had stopped shaking. Now that the moment was here, he felt calm. He knew his food. He knew his science. This would work. Before the meal began, he gave a brief presentation. He explained the biochemistry of the Northern Territories. He showed maps of where each organism was found. He discussed preparation methods and safety protocols. The representatives listened politely, but Jake could see skepticism on some faces. They had heard the claims. Now they wanted to see the evidence. The first course was served. The aerial plankton cakes were golden and delicate, topped with the glowing moss. Jake watched as the representatives took their first bites. The Tauran representative, a being covered in silver fur, made a surprised sound. She took another bite, then another. "This is remarkable," she said. The texture is perfect. The flavor is subtle but complex. This is not just edible. This is good. The other representatives tried their portions. One by one, they expressed surprise and approval. The Mexari representative asked for a second serving. The second course arrived. The steamed tube creatures were arranged artistically on each plate. When the representatives tasted them, the reactions were even stronger. "This tastes like our traditional delicacy from home," the Centauri representative said. "How is this possible?" "These organisms evolved on a completely different world," Jake explained. "Similar biochemistries often produce similar flavor compounds. The organisms in your home oceans and these tube creatures both thrive in acidic environments. They develop similar adaptations. Course after course, the reaction was the same: surprise, appreciation, and growing excitement. These were not just safe organisms. They were delicious. They were nutritious. They could be prepared in countless ways. By the time dessert was served, the atmosphere in the hall had completely changed. The skepticism was gone. The representatives were discussing trade agreements, research partnerships, and culinary exchanges. The Vrin representative, an elderly being with deep green skin, stood up after the meal concluded. "Dr. Porter," she said formally, "you have shown us something extraordinary today. You have proven that assumptions can blind us to reality." The Kellerans looked at these territories and saw death. "You looked and saw life. This is a lesson we should all remember." The hall erupted in applause. Even some of the Kelleran officials were clapping, though Jake could see others looked uncomfortable. Belcran approached Jake after the event ended. His expression was complicated. "You have changed everything," he said quietly. "For my people, for this planet, for how we understand our world. Some Kellerans will see this as a gift. Others will see it as humiliation." "I never meant to humiliate anyone," Jake said. "I just wanted to discover the truth. I know. But truth can be uncomfortable. Still, as a scientist, I must thank you. You have taught me to question my assumptions. That is the most valuable lesson of all." That night, Jake sat with Ben and Kate in the research station, exhausted but satisfied. "They want you to write a book," Kate said. "The Galactic Scientific Community. They want a complete guide to these organisms. Preparation methods, safety protocols, recipes, everything." Jake smiled. "A cookbook from the dead zones." "I like that idea. How many species do you have documented now?" Ben asked. Jake checked his notes. 30. But I think there are more. I am just getting started." The successful demonstration changed everything. Within days, Jake received requests from xenobiologists across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to know more about the hidden ecosystem. Research teams asked for samples. Chefs requested recipes. Universities wanted to study his methods. Jake tried to focus on his research, but the attention was overwhelming. Lisa helped him filter the requests and set up a proper documentation system. They hired 2 more assistants to help with sample collection and analysis. The cookbook project became official. A major publisher in human space offered Jake a contract. They wanted a comprehensive guide to the edible organisms of Kalara 7's northern territories. Jake agreed, but only on one condition. The book would be released in formats compatible with all major species, translated into 12 languages, and made affordable for everyone. He wanted this knowledge to be accessible. Food was too important to lock behind expensive pricing or restricted access. Over the next 2 months, Jake pushed himself harder than ever before. He was determined to complete a full catalog. Every day began before sunrise and ended after dark. He explored deeper into the northern territories, finding new regions and new species. In frozen pools at the highest elevations, he found shrimp-like creatures living in ice. The water was so cold and so acidic that Kellerans had never considered it could support life. But the ice shrimp thrived there, and when properly prepared, they were sweet and tender. Deep underground, in caverns the Kellerans had mapped but never studied closely, Jake found vegetables. They were not like Earth vegetables, but they served the same purpose. They grew in complete darkness, drawing energy from chemical reactions in the rocks. Some were starchy like potatoes. Others were leafy like spinach. One type glowed with natural bioluminescence. Near volcanic activity, he discovered symbiotic relationships between different organisms. There were algae that grew on fungi, creating natural flavor enhancers. The combination was so perfectly balanced that it tasted like salt and herbs mixed together. Jake called it nature's seasoning. He found seeds that were dispersed by the wind, drifting for miles before landing. When analyzed, they proved to have remarkable protein density. One small handful could provide a complete meal's worth of protein. The species count climbed, 35, 40, 43. Each new discovery was documented carefully. Jake wrote detailed notes about habitat, behavior, nutritional content, and preparation methods. He created safety protocols for harvesting and storing each organism, but the work took its toll. Jake lost weight. He slept poorly. His eyes had dark circles underneath them. One evening, Ben confronted him in the lab. "You are exhausting yourself," Ben said. "When was the last time you took a day off?" Jake did not look up from his microscope. "I cannot stop now. There is so much more to discover. There will always be more to discover. But if you work yourself into exhaustion, you will not be able to discover anything." Jake finally looked up. His friend's concern was genuine. "I know. I just feel like I am running out of time." "Why?" "The Northern Territories have been here for millions of years. They will still be here next week. But what if someone else makes these discoveries? What if I miss something important?" Ben sat down across from Jake. "Is that what this is about? Fame? Credit for the discoveries?" "No," Jake said quickly. Then he paused. "Maybe a little. But mostly it is about doing it right. I want this catalog to be complete. I want the cookbook to be perfect. This is the most important work I will ever do. Then do it right. That means taking care of yourself. That means working sustainably. Jake, you came out here because you love exploration and cooking. When did it become just work?" The words hit Jake hard. Ben was right. Somewhere along the way, the joy had been replaced by pressure. The excitement had become anxiety. "Okay," Jake said. "You are right. I will take tomorrow off. No field work. No analysis. Just rest," Ben smiled. "Good. And maybe cook something for fun, not for research. Remember why you started this." The next day, Jake kept his promise. He slept late, then spent the afternoon in the kitchen. He made a meal using some of his favorite discoveries, not for testing or documentation, but just because he wanted to. He invited Ben, Kate, Lisa, and even Velcran to share it. As they ate together, Jake felt the tension draining away. This was what it was supposed to be about: sharing food, connecting with others, celebrating discovery. Velcran surprised everyone by asking for recipes. "My partner wants to try cooking with these organisms," he said. "She cannot eat them herself, but she is curious about the preparation methods. She thinks other species visiting Kalara 7 would appreciate authentic meals." Lisa leaned forward. "That is an interesting idea. Kelleran chefs cooking food for non-Kelleran visitors. It could be a new industry." "It already is," Velcran said. 3 restaurants have opened in the capital specifically to serve food from the Northern Territories. They hire chefs from other species, but Kelleran business owners run them. The economic impact is already significant." Kate looked thoughtful. "Jake, you have not just discovered an ecosystem. You have created an entire industry. Do you realize that?" Jake had not thought about it that way. He had been focused on the science and the cooking. The economic implications had not occurred to him. "There is talk in the government," Velcran continued, "about reclassifying the Northern Territories. They may become protected areas for sustainable harvesting. Tour companies want to bring visitors. Research institutions want to establish permanent stations. Your discoveries have transformed our understanding of our own planet." After the meal, Jake and Velcran walked outside. The Kelleran capital was beautiful at night with bioluminescent plants lining the streets. "I want to apologize," Velcran said. "When you first arrived, I thought you were just another human who did not understand our world. I was wrong. You understood it better than we did." "You were not wrong to be skeptical," Jake said. "Skepticism is good science. You followed the evidence when it proved me right. That is all any scientist can do." "I have been thinking," Velcran said, "about writing a paper, about how biochemical differences can create blind spots in scientific understanding, about how we need cross-species collaboration to see the complete picture. Would you be willing to co-author it with me?" Jake felt honored. "I would be very willing. Thank you." The next week, Jake found the final species for his catalog. It was organism number 47. He had been exploring a deep crevasse when he found them. Small worms that lived in acidic mud at the very bottom. They were almost impossible to reach, but Jake managed to collect samples. When he analyzed them, he found they were packed with omega-3 fatty acids. similar to fish oil on Earth. They would be valuable for both nutrition and medicine, 47 species. It felt like the right number to stop. Jake knew there were probably more organisms out there, but 47 was enough for a comprehensive catalog. It was enough for a cookbook. That evening he started writing. The introduction to the cookbook took him 3 hours to compose. He wanted to explain not just what he had found, but why it mattered. He wrote about assumptions and blind spots, about how every species sees the universe through the filter of their own biology, about how collaboration and curiosity could reveal things that individual perspectives might miss. He wrote about the Kellerans, who had been generous hosts even when his discoveries challenged their understanding. He wrote about his friends who had supported him. He wrote about the importance of sharing food and knowledge. Most importantly, he wrote about the organisms themselves. Each species got a detailed entry: habitat information, physical description, nutritional analysis, safety protocols, preparation methods, recipes. The work consumed him again, but in a different way. This time it felt creative rather than desperate. He was not trying to prove anything anymore. He was just trying to share what he had learned. Kate helped with the nutritional sections. Ben contributed photographs and field notes. Lisa wrote about the importance of cross-species scientific cooperation. Even Velcron wrote a foreword, explaining how human curiosity had taught the Kellerans to see their own world with fresh eyes. 3 months after the demonstration dinner, the cookbook was complete. Jake held the digital file in his hands and felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. This project had defined his life for nearly a year. Now it was finished. What will you do now? Ben asked. Jake smiled. I am not sure, but I know I am ready for whatever comes next. The cookbook was released on a Tuesday morning across 12 major networks simultaneously. Within hours, it became the most downloaded scientific publication in galactic history. Within days, it was simply the most downloaded book of any kind. Jake watched the numbers climb from his quarters at the research station. He had expected some interest, but nothing like this. Millions of downloads in the first week. Tens of millions by the end of the month. The book was being shared, discussed, and debated across hundreds of worlds. News networks wanted interviews. Scientific journals wanted articles. Cooking shows wanted demonstrations. Jake found himself suddenly famous in a way he had never imagined or wanted. Lisa helped him manage the requests. She set up a schedule that balanced public outreach with scientific work. Jake did interviews in the mornings and returned to research in the afternoons. It was exhausting but necessary. The impact went far beyond Kalara 7. Other species began examining their own planets with new perspectives. A research team on the water world of Thessar 9 discovered that their deep ocean trenches, long considered lifeless, actually contained dozens of edible species. The local population had never explored the depths because of pressure and darkness. On Mexar Prime, scientists re-examined their polar regions and found underground ecosystems they had missed. On Tauran 4, abandoned mining tunnels turned out to be home to unique fungi that could feed millions. Jake received messages from researchers across the galaxy. They thanked him for changing how they thought about their work. They shared their own discoveries. The phrase "nothing eats here" became a galactic joke, shorthand for an assumption that needed to be questioned. The galactic scientific community awarded Jake the Xenological Discovery Prize, the highest honor in the field. The ceremony was held on Centauri Prime, the neutral ground where the Galactic Council met. Jake attended with Ben, Kate, and Lisa. He gave a speech at the ceremony. He talked about curiosity and collaboration. He talked about the importance of questioning assumptions. He talked about how food connected species across the galaxy in ways that politics and trade could not. But he also talked about the Kellerans. He made sure to credit Velcron and the others who had supported his work. He emphasized that the discoveries were only possible because the Kellerans had been willing to let humans explore their world and challenge their conclusions. After the ceremony, Jake was approached by representatives from 3 major institutions. They all wanted him to join their research programs. The money they offered was substantial. The resources were impressive. The opportunities were amazing. Jake listened politely but made no commitments. He needed time to think about what he really wanted to do next. Back on Kalara 7, the economic transformation continued. The Northern Territories had become one of the planet's most valuable regions. Tourism brought in revenue. Export of preserved foods created new industries. Research stations employed hundreds of beings from dozens of species. But not all Kellerans were happy about the changes. Some traditionalists felt that their planet had been invaded, their culture disrupted. There were protests in the capital. Some called for restricting access to the Northern Territories. Jake met with Velcron to discuss the situation. The Kelleran scientist had become a good friend over the months of working together. "Some of my people feel threatened," Velcron explained. "For centuries, we were the experts on our own world. Now we learn that we missed entire ecosystems. It is difficult for pride to accept." "I understand," Jake said. "I never meant to make anyone feel inferior. I just saw things from a different angle." "I know, and many Kellerans appreciate what you have done. The government is establishing new scientific programs. Young Kellerans are studying xenobiology in record numbers. You have inspired a generation to think differently, but change is always uncomfortable for some." Jake thought about his own world. Humans had their own struggles with change and tradition. It was a universal challenge. "What do you think will happen?" Jake asked. Velcron was quiet for a moment. "I think we will adapt. Kellerans are nothing if not practical. The benefits of your discoveries are too significant to ignore. In a generation, this will all seem normal. The protests will fade. The Northern Territories will simply be part of our world, no longer forgotten." One evening, Kate found Jake sitting alone in the research station observatory. He was staring out at the stars, lost in thought. "Thinking about the job offers?" she asked. Jake nodded. "They are good offers. Prestigious institutions. Great resources. But I keep thinking about something Ben said months ago. He asked when exploration became just work. I do not want to end up in a laboratory, studying samples other people collect. I want to be out there, discovering things myself. So what are you going to do?" "I got another offer from the Interstellar Exploration Foundation. They are starting a new program called the Cross-Species Culinary Exploration Project. They want me to lead it." Kate raised her eyebrows. "That sounds perfect for you. What is the project about?" "Exploring supposedly barren regions on different worlds. Looking for ecosystems that local species might have missed because of biochemical differences. Exactly what I did here, but across the galaxy." "Are you going to take it?" Jake smiled. "Yes, I think I am. They already have the first destination picked out. A water world called Depth 7. The locals call one region the Dead Ocean. They say nothing can survive in the crushing depths." Kate laughed. "Nothing eats there?" "Exactly. Want to come with me? They need a nutritionist on the team." "Absolutely. This sounds like the adventure of a lifetime." Ben chose to stay on Kalara 7, had fallen in love with the planet and with one of the Kalaran chefs who had started cooking food from the Northern Territories. Together they were opening the first interspecies culinary institute. "You are going to teach aliens how to cook?" Jake asked when Ben told him the news. "Not just aliens, everyone. Kellerans who want to cook for other species, visitors who want to learn about local ingredients. It is going to be amazing. We already have students signing up from 6 different worlds." Jake felt proud of his friend. "That is perfect for you. You were always better at teaching than I was. You taught me everything I know about xenobiology. And you taught me to take care of myself. Fair trade." Lisa was being promoted. She would lead humanity's entire xenobiological program, coordinating research across dozens of planets. It was a huge responsibility, but she was ready for it. "I am proud of you, Jake," she told him during their final meeting. "You did something remarkable here. You changed how we think about exploration and discovery. More importantly, you remembered to be human while doing it. You connected with people. You shared food. You made friends. That matters as much as the scientific achievements." "Thank you for believing in me," Jake said. "Even when I was collecting what the Kellerans called waste products." Lisa smiled. "Good science requires following evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads to the dinner table." On his last night on Kalara 7, Jake prepared one final meal. He invited everyone who had been part of his journey, Ben and his Kelleran partner, Kate and Lisa, Velcron and several other Kelleran scientists, even some of the students from Ben's new institute. He cooked food from all 47 species. It was ambitious, but he wanted to celebrate everything he had discovered. The meal lasted 4 hours. There was laughter, stories, and genuine connection between beings from different worlds. At the end of the evening, Velcron stood to make a toast. To Dr. Jake Porter, he said, who taught us that nothing eats here was the greatest misunderstanding in our history, who showed us that different perspectives reveal different truths, who reminded us that the universe is full of surprises if we are brave enough to look for them. Everyone raised their glasses. Jake felt emotion welling up in his chest. This had been more than just a research project. It had been a transformation, both for himself and for everyone involved. As the party wound down, Jake stood outside looking up at the stars. Tomorrow he would leave Kalara 7. Tomorrow a new adventure would begin. But tonight he was exactly where he needed to be, surrounded by friends, celebrating discovery. Ben came out to stand beside him. "Ready for the dead ocean?" Ben asked. Jake grinned. "More than ready. I'm already thinking about what we might find. Deep-sea organisms, probably. Maybe things similar to Earth's thermal vent communities, or maybe something completely different. Either way, I bet they are delicious." Ben laughed. "Only you would think about taste before thinking about the science." "The science and the taste are connected," Jake said. "Food tells us about biochemistry, evolution, ecology, everything. Plus, at the end of the day, people care more about a good meal than a good research paper." "That is probably true. Good luck out there, Jake. Come back and visit sometime." "I will, and you better save me a spot in your first class. I want to see what you are teaching these students." They shook hands, then embraced. Tomorrow, everything would change. But some friendships lasted forever. 2 years had passed since Jake left Kalara 7. In that time, his cookbook had become more than just a book. It had become a movement. Across the galaxy, species were re-examining their supposedly barren regions with fresh eyes. The discoveries multiplied. On 34 different worlds, researchers found edible ecosystems that had been dismissed or overlooked. Each discovery reinforced the lesson Jake had taught. Assumptions based on single-species biology could hide entire worlds of possibility. The galactic scientific community had changed its protocols. Now all ecological surveys required input from multiple species with different biochemistries. Academic institutions created new degree programs in cross-species ecology. The phrase "nothing eats here" was taught to students as a warning about the dangers of limited perspective. Jake followed these developments from his ship. The vessel was called the Explorer Dawn, a research ship funded by the Interstellar Exploration Foundation. It was small but well-equipped. Kate was there. Along with a crew of specialists from 5 different species, they had visited 3 worlds so far. Each one had its own dead ocean or barren wasteland or lifeless desert. Each time Jake and his team found that life was not absent. It was just different. On Depth 7, the water world, they discovered 63 distinct species living in the crushing depths. The local population, adapted to shallow, warm waters, had never imagined life could exist under such pressure. Jake had written a second cookbook about the discoveries. It was selling almost as well as the first. Today, the Explorer Dawn was approaching their 4th destination. The planet was called Ashara 3, home to the Asharan people. The Asharans were insectoid beings, highly intelligent and deeply traditional. They had contacted the Foundation specifically to request Jake's team. Jake stood on the bridge looking at the planet below. It was beautiful, with swirling blue and green continents. Kate came to stand beside him. "What do we know about the region they want us to explore?" she asked. Jake checked his datapad. "They call it the Glass Desert. It is a region covered in volcanic glass formations. The Asharans say nothing grows there because the glass reflects too much heat and light. The temperature fluctuations are extreme. They have documented the region for 2,000 years and found no life." 2,000 years, Kate said. "That is a long time to be wrong. Or a long time to have incomplete information," Jake corrected gently. "I have learned not to think of these discoveries as proving anyone wrong." Different perspectives, remember? They landed near the Asharan capital. The welcoming committee was impressive. High-ranking scientists, government officials, and even some of their religious leaders. The Asharans took knowledge very seriously. One of the officials, whose name translated roughly to Crystal Wind, addressed Jake through a translator device. "Dr. Porter, we have studied your work on Kalara 7 and Depth 7. We are both excited and concerned. Excited because we may learn something new about our world. Concerned because our understanding of Ashara 3 has been consistent for millennia. If you find nothing, we have wasted your time. If you find something, we must question everything we thought we knew." Jake understood that feeling well. He had seen it on every world he visited. "I cannot promise I will find anything," he said honestly. "But I can promise I will look carefully. Sometimes that is all we can do." The glass desert was unlike anything Jake had seen before. The volcanic glass formed fantastic shapes like frozen waves and crystalline towers. The sunlight reflected off every surface, creating dazzling displays. The heat was intense during the day and the cold was bitter at night. For the first 3 days, Jake found nothing. His scanners detected no organic material. The chemical composition of the glass showed no signs of biological activity. He began to wonder if this might be the first truly barren region he had encountered. But on the 4th day, he noticed something strange. Between two glass formations, in a spot that was shaded most of the day, there was a tiny patch of color. It was almost invisible, just a faint blue-green tint on the glass surface. Jake moved closer and activated his scanner. The readings made him smile. Organic compounds. Photosynthetic activity. Life. It was an organism that lived inside the glass itself. It had evolved to survive within tiny cracks and imperfections in the volcanic glass. During the cool nights, it absorbed moisture from the air. During the hot days, it used the light reflecting through the glass for photosynthesis. It was almost completely flat, just a few cells thick, invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. Once Jake knew what to look for, he found them everywhere. Millions of these tiny organisms painting subtle colors across the glass formations. They formed the base of a miniature ecosystem. There were microorganisms that fed on them, slightly larger organisms that fed on those, and at the top, small creatures that lived in the spaces between glass formations. The Asharans had been looking for life like their own life, big organisms that moved and consumed visible food. They had never considered that life could be microscopic, flat, and living inside glass. Jake spent 2 months documenting the glass desert ecosystem. It was different from anything he had found before. Most of the organisms were too small or too strange to be directly useful as food. But they produced compounds that could be harvested and processed: proteins, vitamins, minerals. The glass desert was not barren. It was just operating at a scale the Asharans could not easily perceive. When Jake presented his findings to the Asharan Scientific Council, the response was profound silence. Then Crystal Wind spoke. "For 2,000 years we walked across the glass desert. We studied it. We documented it. And we never saw this. Not because it was hidden, but because we were not looking at the right scale. Dr. Porter, you have taught us a humbling lesson about the limits of perception." Jake shook his head. "You documented everything perfectly. Your data was accurate. You just interpreted it through the lens of your own biology. That is not a failure. That is just how observation works. Now you have new tools and new perspectives. That is how knowledge grows." Months later, Jake was invited to speak at the Galactic Scientific Council. It was held in a massive station orbiting a neutral star. Representatives from 300 species attended in person. Thousands more watched via broadcast. Jake had given many speeches by now, but this one felt different. This was the heart of galactic science. What he said here would shape policies and programs across countless worlds. He kept it simple. He talked about his first day on Kalara 7, staring at red fungus on volcanic rocks. He talked about how easy it would have been to accept the Kelleran conclusion that it was just toxic waste. He talked about curiosity and the willingness to question. But he also talked about humanity. About how humans had evolved as generalist omnivores on a planet with incredible biological diversity. About how that evolutionary history gave humans broad dietary tolerance and intense curiosity about food. About how these traits, which seemed unremarkable to humans, were actually unusual in the galactic community. "We are not special," Jake said. "We just have different blind spots than you do. Where you see barriers, we see possibilities. Where you see toxins, we see dinner. This is not because humans are better. It is because we are different, and that difference lets us see things you might miss, just as your differences let you see things we miss." He gestured to the assembled species. "The greatest strength of the galactic community is not that we are all the same. It is that we are all different. Every species brings unique perspectives. Every biochemistry reveals different truths. If we work together, if we share our perspectives, there is no limit to what we can discover." The applause was thunderous. Jake stepped away from the podium feeling both proud and humble. After the council session, an elderly diplomat from one of the oldest known species approached him. Her name was too complex for Jake to pronounce, so she simply asked him to call her Elder. Dr. Porter, she said, I have lived for 300 years. I have seen many species join the galactic community. Humans are young by our standards, but you have taught us something valuable. You have shown us that youth and curiosity can reveal truths that age and experience might overlook. Thank you for that gift. That evening, Jake sat in his ship's small kitchen. Kate found him there, reviewing data on their next destination. Another supposedly dead region? She asked. Jake grinned. Of course. This one is on a planet called Frostholm. The locals say their northern ice caps are completely sterile. Nothing can survive temperatures that cold. I bet we will find something. I bet we will too. And then I will write another cookbook. What should I call this one? The Frozen Feast? Kate laughed. Perfect. You know, Jake, I have been thinking, your first cookbook changed everything. It started a movement. But I think the real legacy is not the food you discovered. It is the questions you taught people to ask. Jake thought about that. She was right. The specific organisms he found on Kalara 7 were important, but the bigger impact was philosophical. He had shown the galaxy that assumptions needed to be questioned, that different perspectives mattered, that nothing eats here was never a complete answer. A message came through on his communicator. It was from Ben on Kalara 7. The Culinary Institute had just graduated its 100th class.